Hello everybody and welcome to today's video. We are here today to talk about Trek to Yomi. This is a new title that has been published by Devolver Digital for PlayStation 4 and 5, Xbox One, Xbox Series and PC. Unfortunately it's not on Nintendo Switch, but it's on pretty much everything else. It has been developed by Flying Wild Hog Studio out of Poland and an Italian independent creator called Leonard Menciari. Now, you may or may not know who Menciari is, but he has been around for quite some time in the indie space. His last game was The Eternal Castle, which was infamously difficult. It was a very, very hard game, but it was also brilliant. It was inspired by Another World and those kinds of games of yesteryear, and was this pixel action platformer thing that was just mind-blowing. It also had an incredible marketing campaign behind it, claiming that it was a lost game and all that kind of stuff. That's beyond the scope of this video, but I do recommend you check it out because it does give you a good idea of the kind of creator that Menciari is. He is a true artist. I've done an interview with him before in the lead up to the release of this game, and he is a genuine artist. He thinks about the games that he's creating a lot. He wants to make sure that what he's creating is in some way a reflection of him as a creator, has some strong ideas behind it, and doesn't let the need to be a game necessarily override the artistic vision, which is something that I very much appreciate and enjoy myself. Now, I do have a review up on digitallydownloaded.net if you'd like to check that out, and because of that I'm not going to go into too much detail about the game itself in this video. That would be redundant, but the long and short of it is I did really enjoy it. I think that this is a very cinematic, very attractive game with an excellent combat system. It flows nicely, it moves nicely, and it very much respects the player's time. I don't think there's an actual clock anywhere in the game that tracks how long you've been playing, but it wouldn't have been more than 10 hours for me. It's really a weekend killer rather than a month-long killer, and that is a good thing in this context. Not only does it respect the player's time, but it shows that the developers understood the extent of what they were doing. If it was any longer, it would start to stretch, and in stretching the content out, it would start to lose its artistic credibility. As it is, this kind of short and, well, relatively short and sharp experience, it's very focused. And in that being that focused, it has an intensity and rhythm to it, which makes it very easy to keep playing. So I did enjoy that. I enjoyed pretty much everything about this game. What I want to use this video to do is to talk about the Japanese quality of it, because as I've said about games in the past, which shall go unmentioned because I copped more heat than I thought I would for the last time I brought it up, but often when non-Japanese people make games about Japan, they become very much on the nose. And that's not to say that you can't make a good game about Japan from an outsider's perspective, because of course you can. That would be silly to say otherwise. But a lot of people get really wrapped up into the unique qualities of Japan and try to think that they need to shove all of that into their game. So they'll throw hot springs and poetry and rice fields, and they'll try to make it as kind of gorgeous as possible, kind of like a dream vision of Japan as opposed to the reality. And that is fine. I mean, obviously people enjoyed it. I think everybody that's listening to this video knows which game I'm talking about, but it loses the authenticity, and as a result, ironically enough, it stops feeling like a Japanese game. It starts feeling like a thing that people outside of Japan have this vision about what Japan is, and so make that into their game. Trek to Yomi, if I didn't know that it was Western developers that were behind it, I would be more inclined to think that this was an actual game that came out of Japan. And the reason for it is quite simple. They don't push the Japanese stuff too much. In fact, a lot of what's in Trek to Yomi could be taken out and put into another setting quite comfortably. You could replace the swords with revolvers, for example, and this could easily be a Wild West game. Or you could Dark Souls it up by setting it in a medieval Europe, and it would not feel out of place. because the bulk of the game, the core of the game, is that of a kind of revenge and redemption story, which is very, very common to just about every storytelling tradition out there. In fact, there's a lot about this game which, on various levels, metaphorical and thematic, are very similar to Dante's Inferno, both the epic poem and also the EA game. It doesn't play anything like it, but there is a thematic similarity there, which just shows how transferable what Trek to Yomi is to other settings. So that, ironically, makes it feel more authentic. It doesn't feel like there's an effort in there to make it feel like a Japanese game. It just naturally flows as such. That's not to say that it doesn't have Japanese qualities. Firstly, the aesthetics are definitely there. And certainly the game has the Kurosawa mode going for it with the black and white. But again, that's a good example of what I'm talking about here. At no stage do they say, hey, this is Kurosawa mode. They don't need to reinforce to us that that's the homage that they've got going with this game. It just is. And because it just is, it feels more natural and authentic, and you just roll with it like the developers have rolled with it. So it has the Kurosawa mode. The combat system, and having just said that it would be transferable elsewhere, the combat system that is in there does have that samurai feel to it, because most of the time you're fighting one-on-one with an opponent, and that is a very iconic kind of theme to Japanese swordplay films and stories. And when you do that fighting one-on-one, it's very much about measuring your opponent, waiting for your chance to counterattack and attacking. It's not about being aggressive, it's more about being counter-offensive, which I really enjoyed as well. I wasn't very good at it, as you've probably seen from the footage, but I really did enjoy that quality about it as well. So that felt quite Japanese to me. And they've done a good job with all the presentational elements as well. The dialogue is all in Japanese. It's not a very narrative-driven game because, again, it does keep the narrative quite simple. But what is there is performed very nicely. The voice actors they've got have been are very authentic and all that. So that's another good thing. And the music and stuff is it's kind of in the background, but again, it just subtly reinforces the themes rather than being in your face about it all. It's just there. And to me, if you're going to make a game about a culture that's not yours, the best approach to take is to just let it be and just position it there. Make sure that you get the aesthetics right. Make sure that you don't tell a story that's offensive to that culture, but just let it be. Don't try to remind players that this is what you've done with it. And I think they'll be more receptive to it. At least, certainly that's the case with me. If, like I said earlier in the video, if I didn't know otherwise, I would have thought that this just came out of a Japanese studio. Anyway, that's pretty much all I've got to talk about in the context of this video. I guess in some ways this is my attempt to defend myself against what is inevitably going to come when people see the review score after having responded the way they did to the previous game that I reviewed on this topic. But I don't know what else to really say in the context of this video. This is just my thoughts about how to handle this subject as a non-Japanese person, and I think that Trek to Yomi just does a better job about it by being more natural about it. So yeah, do let me know your own thoughts about Trek to Yomi when you're playing it. I do expect that a lot of people that follow me on this channel will be playing it. Let's have a good chat about it. There will be some things that I'll be interested to hear from you about. Like, there are times where the game does seem to compromise its playability in order to be cinematic, not Japanese, but cinematic. So, for example, there were a couple of times where the screen pulled back so far that I was having trouble seeing things that were going on. There were other times where there'd be a lightning strike at a very inopportune moment, which could be quite distracting. So I would be interested to know if those kind of gameplay elements, which I address in the review, would have distracted you from the game itself, whether the artistic vision has been compromising to the gameplay. I think that's going to be an interesting discussion. But yeah, Other than that, just let me know what you think about Trek to Yomi. And if you've enjoyed this video, if you enjoy what we're doing, please do hit that like and subscribe button. That way you won't miss any in the future. And also, if you want to support what we're doing at digitallydownloaded.net, please do consider backing us on Patreon. You can do so for $1 a month or more if you feel inclined. And on top of supporting these videos and reviews and all the rest that we do, you also get a 56-page magazine, which is exclusive for Patreon backers. That magazine goes into all kinds of things to do with Japanese art and culture, not just video games, but also film and literature and music and the rest. And if you are into your Japanese games, then that will be an interesting insight into the context behind where they come from. So thanks as always for tuning in. We will see you at the next video.